Does hiring Andy Coulson show David Cameron has bad judgment?
Hiring Andy Coulson, does it show David Cameron has bad judgment, John Prescott?
Well, since I wrote to him on the first day he was about to appoint Coulson, when he was in the opposition, leader of the opposition, warning him he'd be in real danger if he appointed this man, because I had been involved years before with this phone hacking, and I knew that he was actively involved in it. He hadn't been convicted, now we know he has. And he still took him on. It was only I think there were many others actually, even his own deputy leader told him not to do. So that was a matter of judgment. Bad judgment, and he made a mistake, and he's now paying for it.
I think quite clearly it was an error of judgment. I mean, Mr Coulson had resigned from the News of the World in 2006 under a bit of a cloud, and he was hired in 2007. He'd been warned by journalists, he'd been warned by, as Lord Prescott has told us tonight, by politicians. Allegedly, he was warned by Buckingham Palace not to take this man on, and he listened to nobody, and he went ahead and did it. Now, we either took Coulson on because he thought he was a bit of a man of the people. You know, the Tories at the time were being perceived as toffs, and this guy had the common touch. Or he took him on because he was trying to cosy up to News International in the run-up to the 2010 general election.
Nonsense. There's no evidence. It's a very serious allegation.
If that is the case, it proves there is an insidious relationship between the press and politicians in this country, and it needs to go away and go away now.
This was not the case.
Why didn't he do security clearance? When I came on a cabinet, everybody goes there, or our officials, they are given security clearance before you get into that job. He did not give them security coverage at the highest level. He did some at the lower level, but he didn't do it.
I know, but it's no good saying it's not true while John is speaking. Let him make his point, and then you can say it's not true. You will have your chance, because that's my job to make sure you do.
A couple of weeks ago, all of the party leaders were taken, had their photos taken holding copies of The Sun. Doesn't that prove that they would all have done exactly the same as Cameron did?
He said that by holding copies of The Sun for publicity, your party leader doing exactly the same thing as Cameron, cozying up to Murdoch. That was the question.
Well, it was wrong, and I wouldn't have done it.
But Tony Blair did the same, didn't he? Went off to make speeches for Murdoch
as well.
You think that was wrong?
Well, I think the relationship, this incestuous relationship between the press and the politicians is a serious matter that you have to address yourself to. And with Gordon Brown and indeed Tony Blair, there was this feeling you had to cosy up to the Murdoch press and they'll win the election for you.
The good thing with all this, I suppose, is that newspaper sales are going down radically in this country, and in the next century, I think it's by 2040 there'll be no newspapers, because people now are getting their information from the internet. So you won't have people cozying up to The Sun or any other newspaper organisations. I think the days of the big press barons are behind us, and I think it's a good thing.
Neil Wallace.
Sorry, let's just get the chronology of this slightly right here. Okay. The original arrests in phone hacking were in 2006.
Yeah.
There was a Labour government in power. He was the Deputy Prime Minister. There were jail sentences in 2007. He was the Deputy Prime Minister. Labour were in power for the next 3 years, during which time there were various Home Secretaries, all of whom had access to this file, all of whom talked to the Metropolitan Police about this. And let's not forget this bit either. Do you remember a bloke called Tony Blair? He became, in 2010, the godfather to Rupert Murdoch's children. What happened here was Labour ignored it. The Labour government he was the Deputy Prime Minister of, because it suited them.
Rubbish.
And the truth, well, the evidence is there.
Let me give you the evidence.
Why did not the Home Secretary, the various Labour Home Secretaries, why did they not demand further inquiries? Because they chose not to. Do you know why? For the simple reason that they wanted to cosy up to Rupert Murdoch. Now, you can actually quite justifiably ask, why did politicians do this? Why is it that in my time as a senior executive there, and incidentally I was an editor of a Mirror Group paper that was supporting Labour, right? Why do politicians always are prepared to crawl over broken glass to politicians?
All right.
Because they want to reach you. They're all the same.
You, sir.
How many other organisations and newspapers, including TV journalists, are guilty of the same offence?
And what is the offence?
Phone hacking.
Did you, when you were the deputy editor to Coulson, did you know that this was going on? Did you have any indication, or did you just sit there as a deputy, sometimes substitute, and not know that all these stories in the paper were coming from hacking?
Well, I guess that I was a bit like the Deputy Prime Minister who didn't know anything either. Really.
Are you saying you didn't know? Are you saying you didn't know?
I have always said that I thought that phone hacking was disgusting and was wrong.
But did you
and
know?
Should not have, no, I didn't.
Did you not
Right,
suspect?
so you were just bloody incompetent.
But Neil, did you not
Well,
suspect?
coming from the Deputy Prime Minister, the bloke who was second in command of running the country, I don't know who you are to call anybody bloody incompetent.
But
Well, you certainly were, and you must have known.
But when you get a story, one of the things that you say...
What you just said is like...
When you get...
How fearful should we be of British combatants returning from Syria?
With the fact that it's been revealed that the government made the mistake of deporting Abu Qatada of terrorist charges of which he's been acquitted, is it possible to justify actions against potential militants who have gone to Syria?
Well, we're talking about 500 Brits who've gone out to fight in Syria. I suspect that that would have been a lot more if Haig and Cameron got their way and we got involved in what is essentially a civil war. There would have been double that, which would have been utter madness. I think what we have to do in this country is to tackle extremism. Yes, it has to be done on a government basis, but equally it has to be done from the Muslim communities themselves. They've got to deal with the small, tiny minority of extremists. You know, 99% of Muslims in this country are peaceful, hard-working, obey the rule of law, and they are a benefit to Britain. OK? But the problem is you have a small minority who are basically giving everyone a bad name. This has to be done through education, the teaching of British values in schools, dealing with these pop-up jihadist meetings through our anti-terrorist organisations, and the big one is let's stop involving ourselves in far-flung Middle East wars that have absolutely nothing to do with us.
I've listened to what's been said this evening, and the Conservative Party, which are the leading party in the country, have got to make a stand on these extremists that are going out of the country and coming back in. You talk about action, but I think the public want to know what you're going to do. When these come back into the country, what action are you going to take?
Well, of course, there is always the fact that we have good intelligence and we have counter-terrorism measures. We've already taken away the passports already so that they don't even go out there of at least 64 people. So I think all those measures are there.
And are we talking 500? Are we talking 1,000?
We believe, because it's very difficult, unless you have good intelligence and good counter-terrorism officers and so on, which we do have, but it's always very difficult because we know that one of the points of entry, for example, is somebody going on holiday to Turkey, and then they'll find their way into Syria or into Iraq.
Talking like 500.
Yes.
They can easily be controlled by, for example, you could tag them for a certain period of time, so you can monitor A, where they're going, B, what they're doing, and then after 2 or 3 months and they've settled back into the community, well, leave them alone then.
That's right. If they found that, if we can prove that they've committed criminal offences
we need action.
and they've been involved in conspiracy,
something.
then when they return, then that is what
But
will
it's a
happen.
criminal act to go and fight abroad, isn't it?
Yeah,
it has been since 1870.
Yes. So, and we know that, and that's why we take the passports away of people.
Yes, I want you to be able to just answer the attack that was made on you by the gentleman.
Well, I'm sure it's well-intentioned, and, you know, I really understand where you're coming from. Look,
you better just briefly explain what it is for the people who heard
the gentleman was talking
you.
Because on my Twitter account, you can all go and check it out if you want. On my Twitter account, somebody tweeted an image of the Prophet Muhammad. I, as a Muslim, retweeted the image and said, A, I'm not offended by anyone who's not bound by those rules to tweet the image of my Prophet, and I said, God is greater than to take offence at such basic. It was a cartoon of Jesus saying hello to Mo, and Mo saying, how are you doing? I mean, it was really, really bland. And it just caused a furore. And the reason it did is because it's prohibited within traditional interpretations of Sunni Islam to draw the Prophet. And my point was, look, coming back to all this theme on communities, and this is where I'd like to address you, sir, because I'm coming from where you're coming from. I've served time in prison. I actually opposed the Iraq War from a jail cell in Egypt. You know, I've witnessed torture. I know where you're coming from. I've seen all the grievances of your worst nightmares. So it's not that I don't empathise with the concerns of the Muslim communities. The issue is that we have got to take a level of responsibility within our own communities to address these issues. If racism was widespread, when I grew up in Essex among the white working classes, responsibility was taken to a point where we have now a black president of America. The debate was shifted in civil society. It's now taboo to be racist. Likewise with homophobia, likewise with anti-Semitism, because that's how civil society debates can shift when people get involved in activism. So my purpose in retweeting the image was to say, look, we have got to open up our faith to scrutiny. We've got to open up our views and our beliefs to scrutiny as everyone else is scrutinised, and we've got to be mature enough not to feel offended when somebody says, I don't agree with this particular view of your religion, but we've got to have an open debate about it, and that's what it means to be in a liberal society.
All right.
You're absolutely right, it does have to be tackled within the communities, but equally, we are giving, through our own actions since the turn of the century, we have been given oxygen to these hate preachers because we've been following this sort of neo-con foreign policy where we think we can run round the world acting as the world's policeman and spreading Western democracy to countries that have never known democracies. I'm sorry, it just doesn't work. These wars, these civil wars, are none of our business, and we don't want to see any British blood spilt in these countries anymore.
We're going to move on. I'd like to take this question, please, next, from Louise Hingley. Louise Hingley.
With Cameron seemingly having lost the battle over the next European Commission President, does this indicate future failure to renegotiate Britain's relationship within the EU?
It looks as though Jean-Claude Juncker is going to become head of the President of the Commission. Not beheaded, no, the President. Headed. No, I'm sure UKIP might behead him, but they won't. Paul Nuttall.
Well, I'll get to vote on this in a couple of weeks. It looks...
That'd be rare for you to go and vote in the European Parliament. You're hardly ever there. Hang on. How many times have you been there since you've been an MEP? Just on the odd occasion?
My job as Deputy Leader of UKIP is to drive public opinion in this country, and I think we've been very successful.
You're an elected
coming off the back. Let me finish. Coming off the back of winning those European elections. I will get the opportunity to vote on Mr Juncker in a couple of weeks, and I will certainly be voting against his appointment because the European Parliament has that right to veto. Now, the European Union has told us that we're very democratic now, and we will give the European Parliament the right to vote on the European Commissioner. Guess how many candidates we've been given? One. Democracy EU style. The fact is that if Mr Juncker is appointed like we suspect, it will prove three things. One, the European Union hasn't learned anything from the European elections, where there was widespread Euroscepticism across the European Union. Two, Mr Cameron's promise of renegotiation is pie in the sky, because you can't renegotiate with an organisation that doesn't want to enter into negotiations. Thirdly, Britain is more isolated now in Europe than it has ever been. Europe is going this way, we're going that way, and the better off thing for us to do is to leave the European Union, be friends with our European partners, trade with them, but let's leave the politics behind.
All right.
If we get elected as a majority government in 2015, we've set ourselves the absolute promise that we've got 2 years to look at how we renegotiate our relationship with the European Union. But I put my cards absolutely on the table. I hope that we remain a member of the European Union. I have no doubt it is in Britain's interests to remain within the European Union. I certainly take my responsibility seriously, and I don't just take the money and not turn up to vote.
Hang on. Hang on. Over half the votes which go through the European Parliament are non-legislative. They are not worth the paper they are written on. It is a talking shop. It has no power to initiate any laws. The Commission, which meets in secret, actually hands the laws down to the European Parliament to rubber stamp. The fact of the matter is that this is totally and utterly undemocratic, and we will be better off out. For you, Anna, for example, to make the laws of this land. All we want is for the people who make the laws to be the people we elect.
Just to answer Anna's point, do you have any qualms? Do you have any qualms about, as you put it, having a very flaky attendance record, according to the newspapers, the worst of all, and taking round about 600,000 a year
600,000
to do it? Do you have any qualms about that?
I don't take £600,000. I wish I did. Well, an MEP's salary is £81,000, but on top of that, you get... hold on, let me finish. On top of that, you get €301, I think it is, a day to sign in. And as I very rarely sign in, I earn less money than any other MEP.
How many staff do you employ?
Sorry?
How many staff do you
employ?
also?
Let's not get on. This is getting silly.
My constituency is 7.5 million people. Yours is about 70,000.
You'll no doubt be issuing a writ against the Independent for the £600,000 claim.
Well, I've no idea where that figure comes from, to be perfectly honest with you.
Fine. All right, over a number of years, apparently.
Well, look, you know, if Britain did come out, as I said earlier, we could trade, we could be friends with our European partners, but we are the 6th largest economy in the world. We have links to the Anglosphere, we have links to the Commonwealth. This country could stand alone, be more democratic, more free, and have more money. It makes sense to leave the European Union.
Okay.
Far better in actually campaigning for what issues are and trying to move people's voting to come back to making more decisions in Westminster.
But Mr. Cameron's already said he's going to campaign to stay in, no matter what the result of the negotiations.
I don't like leaving a serious topic for this, but this is a topic that I know everybody in the country, except for me, is very concerned about. And it's a question from Samina Hussain. Let's just have that before we finish. You've got a couple of minutes.
Does Suarez's 4-month match ban suggest football is soft and violent behaviour?
It is so sad, isn't it? Because he's actually a brilliant footballer. I mean, he's absolutely... Even Paul, we would agree on this, wouldn't we? Liverpool fan. But, I mean, it was outrageous. 3rd time he's done it. Personally, I'd have him, if you could, criminally. He should be charged, and if something like that, he'd be right on the edge of going away. 4 months, I'd make it more, but that would really upset.
I thought Liverpool's selling him, aren't they?
They are now.
Not now. In fact, I think he probably would have got a move to Real Madrid or Barcelona if this didn't happen. I think the fact that he has now gone and done this, and we're not going to see him in a red shirt till November, means it's going to be far more difficult for us to win the league.
He'd be cheap at the price, won't he? You know, because he won't.
Why don't he just take his teeth out?
My thanks to all our panellists here and to all of you who came to Wolverhampton to take part in tonight's edition of Question Time, and until next Thursday, good night.